This is the third part of a four-part series called Judaism's Perspectives on Connecting When Separated. I credit Mona Fishbane, who I think is joining with us this evening, for putting together the series. There you go, Mona.
Credit Dennis Klein.
Okay, mutual crediting has just taken place. It has been a team effort, and I think it really worked out quite well. Mona was the presenter several weeks ago, and Iska Waldman then offered us some really important remarks to address the overall theme, which is Judaism's perspectives on connecting when separated. I was just chatting a bit with Jerry when Mona and I thought about putting together this series. Of course, what was not only on our minds, but the only things that were on our minds was the COVID pandemic. And now, as we all know, we're faced with yet another crisis. And so we can comment on our state of the world, but we can only say that we're also very concerned. And maybe our speaker tonight might want to somehow make that connection. That's, of course, his choice. Let me proceed with introducing to you who needs, as in this case, this is so obvious, this cliche, but this is one person in our community that needs no introduction, but I shall do it anyway. It is my pleasure to introduce a co-religionist and a 19th century phrase, we know, good friend and yes, a neighbor, even a good neighbor, Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Diamond. He is Rabbi Judah Nadich Associate Professor of Talmud and Rabbinics at the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. He is the author of Holy Men and Hunger Artists and has edited and annotated a forthcoming edition of Professor Louis Ginsburg's commentary on Yerushalmi Pesachim. He is also working on a book that will offer reflections on a spiritual memoir focused on his own davening, practice, and experience. The title of the presentation this evening is Praying Together and Praying Alone, Challenges and Opportunity.
I'll come over there.
Can I again ask everybody to mute yourself? There's a few people who are not muted. Please, everybody, check that you're muted. Thank you.
And I can do some muting from my end. Okay, Eliezer, the floor, as they say, if you want to look down for the moment, is yours.
No, rather not. I'll just speak. So once, first of all, good evening, everybody. Once when I spoke at a shul, I gave 3 lectures, and before the third one, Rabbi said, and here is a man who needs no introduction, so he's not going to get any. So that's that was low-hanging fruit, Dennis. You missed.
I could have gone there. It's true.
You should have.
Yeah. Next time.
So, and thank you. Very fond of Dennis. We're fond of each other. When I start classes at JTS of the last couple of years, I've invited the students and myself to take a moment to welcome the presence of the Shekhinah into the room. And what I mean by that is, in my way of thinking, the Shekhinah is always present. There's a presence around us and also in us. And the challenge is to know that it's there. I don't always feel it, and sometimes I feel I want that presence and I'm having trouble finding it, but it's there. And it's there no matter how many people are gathered. Rabbi Pitkowski just taught between Mincha and Ma'ariv a Mishnah from Pirkei Avot. And the Mishnah says, it talks about the fact that when two people are together and study Torah, the Shekhinah is present, dwells among them. And the end of the Mishnah says, okay, that's true for two. How do we know that it's true even for one? Even for one person who is engaged in Torah, still the Mishnah says the Shekhinah is present. And I want to suggest that in terms of our davening life, we have an opportunity in the present situation. And that is very often where we're in shul, we're focused on the horizontal aspect of davening, by which I mean the community building aspect of davening. We're together, we feel each other's presence. We do what I sometimes like to call, especially during the Amidah, we daven alone together. We're engaged in personal prayer, but we know and we can feel the presence of other people around us. And sometimes I've even seen people talking to each other in shul during davening, ideally before or after. But the point is that there's tremendous amount of human connection. What is more challenging, and sometimes the horizontal aspect of davening actually gets in the way of the second aspect, is having the experience of being in God's presence. In other words, just as the Shekhinah is there for us, the question is, are we present for the Shekhinah? Do we bring our whole selves to the Shekhinah? And it's a hard thing to do. You know, I believe that in the act of davening, we are meant to be able to offload the burden of individuality, to feel that we are connected to something greater than ourselves. Both the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Shekhinah, and also all of humanity. The Mishnah in Sanhedrin says that a person is obligated to say, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, that the world was created for my sake, which a first read, you walk away with the impression that it's incredibly narcissistic. You know, it's all about me. It's been pointed out that there's another way of reading it. And that is that why is it that the world, it would be right to create the world just for me? Because every human life is of infinite value. So if I really understand what it means that the world was created for me, what it means is my life and every life is of infinite value. And so what I have the chance to experience in my davening is that infinite value of my own life, of me, and to understand that I am surrounded by others of the same infinite value. So that I think is a very special opportunity that we have in davening. And apropos of that, I want to say that for me, and I want to encourage other people to experience davening this way, it's very possible to experience davening, and that definitely is a part of what davening is, as for God, as an offering. And it is that. It's a spiritual discipline. It's a service, serving God. But ideally, it's for us. Ideally, a good davening experience is one in which we are given a great gift. So what I want to speak about tonight is the ways in which, if I am davening alone, not on Zoom and not live streaming. I do Zoom davening. I'm not in any way speaking against it. What I'm also saying is that in these moments of being alone, we have the opportunity to not run away from that aloneness and to take that moment to be what one of the Greek philosophers calls the flight of the alone to the alone. We are alone, ultimately. There's some part of us that is us that no one else really can penetrate. And we are flying to the ultimate reality, to God, also ultimately cannot be understood, really. The full depth of who God is can't be understood. At the same time that I say this, I want to say to you that we can experience davening as a chevruta, even when we're davening by ourselves. I gave another version of this talk where I called it the Sidur as chevruta. And I want to say at the outset, if you don't have it, I highly recommend. Mine is like really ripped up. I need to find a bookbinder. But this Sidur is my friend. This Sidur has been through a lot with me. And I really feel that it's my friend. I turn to it, I'm happy, when I'm sad, depressed, angry. You know, we could cycle through all the emotions. But the point is, this Sidur, in some sense, holds all of those experiences and is a record, in a sense, of those experiences. It's been with me. So if you don't have your own Sidur, I really recommend and urge you to have your own Sidur, to have a Sidur that's your friend, that's your chavruta. And on the sheet, and Dennis, if we could now look at the sources, I quoted at the very beginning. There we go. If we go to the top, let's go to source one. That's a good way of doing it. And I'm going to read the Hebrew first because this is Agnon. It's just so beautiful. And he writes as follows. This is called Sipur Na'eh Shel Sidur Tfilati, a beautiful story about my Sidur. He says, Sidur Chadash Hevi li Abba min hayirid, Amudav Levanim, Otiotav Me'irot Einayim, Krichato Na'a, Ze Siduri Achai V'Re'ai, Zera Kodesh Ahuvai. Kol Hayom Achazti et HaSidur, Hafachti Bo V'Hipachti Bo, Kama Tfilot Charuzot B'Sidur Katan Ze, Shel Shabbat V'Shel Chol, Shel Rosh Chodesh V'Shel Shalosh Regalim, Shel Rosh Hashanah V'Shel Yom HaKippurim, Shel Chanukah V'Shel Purim, Kipel HaKadosh Baruch Hu et Kol Hayamim Kulam B'Sidur Sheli. Father brought me a new Sidur from the fair. Its pages are white. Its letters illuminate the eyes. It is printed in clear type. And Dennis, let's move it up a little bit. Right? And it has a handsome binding. This is my Sidur, my brothers and friends, beloved Holy Seed. I held the Sidur in my hands all day, turning its pages constantly. So many prayers woven together in this small Sidur. Shabbat and weekdays, Rosh Chodesh and the Shalosh Regalim, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Chanukah and Purim. The Holy One folded together all these days in my Sidur. I love that last image, that the Sidur folds together for us, holds together for us our yearly cycle, and also, depending on how extensive the Sidur is, the life cycle. You know, Sidurim have, ritual for Brit, for Pidyon Haben, for weddings, and even some Sidurim have the funeral liturgy in it as well. So a Sidur is both very personal, right? It accompanies me through my personal journeys, and it's a way of holding with me the communal, the transhistorical, all of the Jewish holidays that have been celebrated again and again and again over the course of the centuries. So now what I want to do is share with you a couple of teachings that are about thinking about the davening experience, even when we're davening by ourselves on our own, as having a chavruta, having something or someone there. And I've already introduced that by thinking about the Sidur as a chavruta, as a partner. So let's look at source number 2. Move down a little. It's actually on 2 pages, but let's start with what's on page 1. So the rabbis have a teaching, Hashmeya le'oznecha ma shepicha omer, which means let your ears hear what your mouth says. Now, originally, this teaching is in a particular halachic context, which is the view that when I recite the Shema, I have to actually recite it loud enough that I myself hear the words that I'm reciting. And that's a dispute, as are so many things. But those who say that you have to hear the Shema as you recite it say, the Pasuk says, Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel. And they interpret that to mean, Hashmeya lo'oznecha, let your ears hear, ma shepicha omer, what your mouth says. And so what I've written here is that part of what this means is to open yourself to the voice of the Sidur. Because prayer is really, especially when we're praying fixed liturgy, it's a very complicated act. Because it's not my words, but in some sense, it's supposed to be my voice. So how does that happen? And what I'm saying is, to some extent, it can only happen if I'm listening. I'm listening to the very words that I'm saying. And here I want to say something very important. I think that too often, the way we relate to the Sidur is, like, this is us, and this is the Sidur. And the Sidur is telling us how it is. You know, some people regard the Sidur as a catechism. The Sidur tells us what we should believe, what Jews should believe. I'm not a big fan of that way of thinking about the Sidur, because what I want to point out is that the people who composed the Sidur, the various prayers, they didn't, in terms of the ultimate truths about life and the cosmos, they didn't really know any more than we did. I mean, they were, the author of the Orach Mesharim says, the fundamental truth about being a human being, from the moment we come into the world to the moment we leave, is that we are profoundly not knowing beings, right? Sort of the opposite of Homo sapiens. Of course, we learn a lot as we go on. Also, if you're me, also forget a lot as we go on. But we are ultimately not knowing beings. There's so much that we don't know, and we need to know that. And the authors of the Sidur, what did they do? They went to sources that were divinely inspired. So much of the Sidur are biblical verses. And then there are also prayers that were composed by rabbis and others. But the way I think about the authors of the Sidur is that they are trying to make sense of a chaotic world. And so it's not they're here telling us how it is and we're here listening to how it is. We're together. They are guides. They say we've moved forward as these essentially not knowing beings, but still having inherited great wisdom and having insight of our own. And we want to serve as your guides to help you work your way through this mystery that's called life. And part of the way that tefillah helps us do that is it is a reframing process, by which I mean it reframes the world for us and it reframes for ourselves who we are. So let's think about the first. Think about the first bracha before the Shema. which is, at least in the morning service, the Tfilat Shacharit, we speak of God as Yotzer Or Uvorei Choshech, Oseh Shalom Uvorei Et HaKol, which is a euphemistically amended verse from Isaiah. God creates light as well as darkness, creates peace or harmony, and also creates everything, which in the original verse is creates evil, right? Isaiah doesn't try to fudge it, right? If there's evil in the world, where does it come from? It comes from the Creator. So evil also comes from the Creator. The rabbis chose to amend that verse and to change it to uvorei et hakol, creates everything. Now, at some level, you could say there's sort of, that is a kind of a fudge. We don't want to say the resh word. But I think they're also saying something else. They're saying that the way to think about the evil and the chaos in the world is part of something that ultimately is orderly, or at least has some kind of plan and purpose. And that doesn't mean that when you and I wake up every morning and read the Times or whatever it is that you're reading, and see the world in which we live, that you say, yeah, boy, the rabbis had it right. God just, he put it together perfectly. It's running like clockwork. That is definitely not our experience of the world. But we look for that. We look for the ways in which the world is orderly and beautiful, and we try to be partners with God in creating that kind of world. So that's what I mean, let me just make sure that the point I'm making here is clear. For me, I don't believe that's in saying that bracha, it's a case of the emperor's clothes. I can say, yeah, beautiful, everything is orderly, right? Let's not let the facts confuse us. No, it expresses a yearning, and it expresses a charge that we have to make that true, to the extent that that is within our capabilities. But all of that only works if we don't daven. You know, it's kind of sad that in Yiddish, to daven, you know, he davened it up, means right, to just motor through something. And that is one style of davening. And frankly, since we have way too many words in the Siddur as it stands, in my opinion, sometimes it's hard not to do that. But real davening, or what I like to call, I don't remember if I came up with this or I read it somewhere or I dreamt it, what I like to call deep davening. Deep davening means listening to the words that I'm saying. What are they saying to me? What are the words Yotzer or Uvrei Choshech saying to me? What way are they reassuring me, challenging me, comforting me, something? What are these words doing? Now, I think it's important to say, besides having your own Siddur, you should have your own tefillah, right? Some prayers, I think, I mean, maybe there's somebody out there who loves every single prayer in the Siddur. I am not one of those people. But there are prayers that I love. I love the beginning of the second bracha before the Shema. Ahava Rabbah Ahavtanu. You have loved us, God, with a great love. Because that's something that we Jews are not always so good about. You know, I once talked at some shul somewhere sometime about how God loves us. And someone jumped out of his seat and said, I don't want to hear any Christian talk in my synagogue. Now, that's extreme, but we kind of know where that guy is coming from. the ecumenical scholar A. Roy Eckhart said once, I quote this sentence all the time, I was going to say pasuk. For me, actually, it has almost become scripture. He says, Jews have a lot to learn from Christians about love. Christians have a lot to learn from Jews about responsibility. That's an oversimplification like many. But if we focus on the first part, I mean, as far as the second part is concerned, as somebody once said to me, you know, Jesus never had to make a payroll. You know, we Jews are good at creating community, you know. But think about the first part for a moment. How many of us can say that we feel loved by God? Because if you go back to what I said before about Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam, the world, you know, it would have been right for the world to be created just for me. It doesn't say it would have been worthwhile for the world to be created just for me as long as I get a PhD, as long as I have an A average, as long as whatever it is. It says, in and of itself, who I am with all of my faults, when I come to davening, I'm coming before someone who loves me unconditionally. That I believe that's the experience that I tried to have. So, in short, Hashmea Loznecha means the Siddur is trying to talk to us, saying, while you're saying these words, listen to them. What are they trying to teach you? And I also included here the fact that there's a proverb, and let's just go to these same words, Hashmea Loznecha, Masha Picha Omer, is used as a proverb. And if you look at the top of the next page, Daber la'atzmacha bilvad lifnei sha'ato omer la'acherim et dvarecha. Speak to yourself first, and only then direct your words towards others. Good life advice in general, right? Which is that when we're ready to reprove other people or tell other people how it should be and what is right, are we really listening ourselves to those words and realizing that they apply first and foremost to us? So that's the sense in which the Siddur can challenge us. It can comfort us and it can challenge us. So if I really listen to the words of the Siddur and realize, hey, that's talking about me, okay, how am I serving God? We will serve you. You are the sovereign. What does that actually mean in my life? How is that happening? So let's actually skip to page, where is it again? Let's skip to page 3. And let's a little bit more, great. Okay, good. So speaking of the Siddur speaking to us, and we say the words, and the words also speak to us. This give and take, or this symbiosis, is built into the structure of the Siddur itself. And this is not a new point, but it's an important one. It's been pointed out that in the first paragraph of the Shema, we are told that we should love God, v'chol levavcha, v'chol nafshecha, v'chol meodecha, right? To love God with all our hearts, our souls, and our might, sometimes translated, with everything that we are. If you look at the bracha immediately preceding the Shema, and I mentioned it before, it begins, Ahava Rabba Avtanu. You have loved us with a great love. So what's happening here? The Siddur is saying that when Deuteronomy, when Dvarim in the Parshat Shema calls upon me to love God, that is actually in response to God's love. Right? The previous bracha says, you, God, have loved us. And when we love you, that is a response to your love. And how does God love us? So according to that bracha, the bracha that immediately precedes the Shema, that love is the giving of the Torah. I once taught this when I was at a gathering of Christians. It was about environmentalism, but it became clear that they wanted me to be the Jew. They wanted to hear Jewish stuff. And so I taught Ahava Rabbah. And I said, think about what it says. Where is the love? The love is Vatalamdein Chukei Chayim. God has taught us, or taught our ancestors, and therefore us, life-giving laws. So one of the ways, not the only way, but one of the ways that God's love is expressed is in giving us laws, in giving us halakha, which enables us to order our lives and to act in ways that reflect greater values, very important values. That is a form of love. Right? We don't always necessarily think about that as love, but it really is. The Talmud says that a parent has 5 obligations towards a child. So one is, it's very gendered. What can I do? It still has application to all genders. But first of all, let's just say it as it is. So the Talmud says the first obligation is that a father has to circumcise his son. Second obligation is to redeem the child if it's a firstborn son, pidyon haben. The third obligation is to teach the child Torah. The fourth obligation is to teach the child a trade. And the fifth obligation is to marry off that child. Now, all of these are expressions of love. They're about creating discipline. They're about imposing, right, on a child an identity at 8 days old. I don't ask to be circumcised. So my parents are imposing an identity upon me. But taking on these tasks is really an expression of love. Is saying to my child, I want you to be the best person that you can be. We can disagree about what that means and how that is achieved, but that's the idea. That's the idea behind those tasks. So I think we have to imagine Ahava Rabbah saying that same thing, that we are loved by God, and the love is being offered a godly way of living. Let's talk about another way in which we are not alone or not supposed to be alone when we are, even when we're davening on our own. So just read the English here, the next paragraph. And I was just skipping down to, that paragraph there, right? A person, I'm going to take mine because it's a little obscured there. A person should try to pray in the synagogue with the congregation. And if they are unable or literally coerced to come, in other words, due to circumstances beyond their control, they're coerced, they can't come to shul, like there's a coronavirus, for example, they should intend to pray while the congregation is praying. Now, of course, that's not exactly our situation, but I'll come back to it. This applies to people living in small settlements, unable to pray in a minyan. Right? In Europe, there were towns when there were 3 or 4 Jewish families. They didn't have a minyan. Very often for the Amim Noraim, they would go into a larger town, and that's when they would daven with a minyan, but not the rest of the time. So they nevertheless should pray Shacharit and Arvit during the time of congregational prayer. Okay? And then all right, so let's stop there. So what does that mean today? We do in our shul, we do have a Zoom minyan. So I would say that part of what it means is that if I can't participate in that minyan or any other minyan, I should do my best to pray at the time, around the time when that minyan is taking place. Because the idea is, I think, that we are connected beyond seeing each other, beyond being in the same place. We're connected because we believe in the same things, or we do the same things, or we care about the same things, and we care about each other. And davening at the same time that other people are davening, we're really supporting each other. The rabbis say many different ways and many different times that God listens to the prayer of the community more than God listens to the prayer of the individual. I don't know if it's, I used to think it's obvious that should be true. I'm not so sure it is obvious. But I'll tell you one of the ways that I understand this. I understand this as meaning that when we come together in prayer, one of the things that we're doing is showing that we care about each other. It's been pointed out many times that almost all of our prayers are in the plural. Okay? When we ask for the year to be blessed, we don't say, Barech alai et hashana hazot l'tova. We say, Barech aleinu. We don't say, make it a blessed year for me. We say, make it a blessed year for everybody. So tefillah b'tzibur really means that when we come together as a tzibur, one of our tasks is to support the people around us. Part of the support is simply, I think for many people, it's easier to open up a siddur and daven. Many of us are not sure what we're doing or exactly what we mean by what we're doing. And just the fact that I'm sitting next to someone else who's doing the same thing encourages me to daven, and sometimes can strengthen my feeling of the value of what I'm doing. And of course, davening together is also about the Kiddush. And what I mean by that is, coming together to daven also means coming together in other ways, talking, sharing in other people's smachot, supporting them and comforting them in moments of sorrow. So even if I'm on my own, if I say to myself, I'm not just praying for fill in the name here, I'm praying as part of a community, and I know that when the other people who are praying at this moment are saying Barech Aleinu, they're asking for blessing for all of us, which includes me. And I, in my prayers, am asking for blessings for all of us. So that is another way that we can be together, or that we can feel together with the people who are not with us, but in some sense are with us.